or not verify an urban legend of Whitstran. The legend is that up on the McCready Road is a little two-story house. And Peter Steinbock and his wife Celia lived in the little white house and became the parents of 12 girls in a row. Then they moved up to Case Road near our farm at a new house, and they had 5 boys in a row. Meanwhile, Leon Dufault and his wife moved into the little white house and had 9 girls in a row. So out of the little white house, 21 female babies. Can anyone verify true, false, or not? Connie says she remembers.
No, it is a true story.
So the little white house had some magical properties.
No.
I don't think about that.
Elise, here's another part of the legend. So many people, I wish I could remember the names of all the people that used to come into the Whitstran store. And Pete and Celia used to come into the store and they'd bring some of their kids. They couldn't bring all 17 of them at one time, but I remember Pete coming into the store, and I think it was Wayne Hogue that was in there, or maybe it was Pete Szymanski. Anyway, he'd had another daughter. It was like the 7th or 8th daughter in a row, and this other farmer said, "Well, Pete, looks like a girl every time, huh?" And Pete said, "No, sometimes nothing."
I think in that family, all the boys are still alive, and I thought Stephen told me that maybe 2 of his sisters are still alive. So
It's more than 2.
In that big family, it was kind of a set thing that one of the older girls was always in charge of a specific younger brother, and that's how they managed. You know, the older kid was assigned someone younger, and they took care of him. Yeah, they had a huge table,
and the Audrey, the oldest, would take care of maybe the 6th child that was born, and then the next girl was Florence, and she took care of the next one. And there was, I remember the kids. I can't remember the girls after. I think it was after Celia. I don't remember the rest of them, where they came in. But I worked at the research center, and I had to go to Othello once in a while, and I used to work with the youngest one, John, up at Othello.
Yeah.
So I know the whole family, just about.
Esther, would you like to share the things that
Well, I was just going to show, but these are just the pictures of, actually, Gary has given them to me, but they were given to him by Irva Jacobson, whose family used to live down.
Yeah.
Anybody remember them?
Yep.
Yes. Anyway, well, anyway, they're just pictures of kids that went to school at Whitstran when we did, 1940. Like, I started in the 1st grade in 1941, and that was a terrible time, 1941, when the war broke out. I remember, this is stupid on my part, but anyway, I remember the family was kind of talking about having to go to war. All the men folk were going to have to go to war. That was just it. It did not matter what you really did. Of course, Dad was just a farmer. But still, I remember them all talking about it, and then I remember Mom and Dad talking about it. And then I went to school, and the 2 teachers were starting to talk about the husbands of the young men were having to go to war. And I started crying, and Miss Johnson asked me, she said, "Esther, why are you crying?" And I said, "Because my dad's going to have to go to war, and I'm going to have to quit school and go to work, get a job. I was only 6. Why was I thinking? My mom couldn't support us, you know. Well, we just lived on a little old farm that didn't amount to much, you know, and anyway, but Dad didn't have to go, thank heavens. But it was hard times. It was really, really bad. I remember too, then, because it was just right after Depression, and so I remember, you know, Daddy went to work for the WPA because in those days you went to work so that you could get commodities and stuff like that. And it was just tough making ends meet. And then World War II started, and so then you had to be on ration. There was 4 of us in the family, 4 kids in the family. I think we were given a coupon or something for 4 pairs of shoes a year. So I wore, you know, whatever shoes would fit me. It didn't matter. Or go to school football, you know, barefooted. I mean, it was just, those were just really, really hard times. It was just not good. But yeah, my pictures, I forgot where I was going. I put a quarter in me, and it's too bad, guys.
I'm being acknowledging our community here in a couple minutes, but we've got the place until noon. So we do have some more time. I'm curious, Jane and Jackie, how did because we went to school here when we were kids, how was it that your parents were here, and how was it that your parents were here?
My family lived in Richland. My dad worked out at Hanford. And when Richland was a government town, they owned all the houses, and when they decided to no longer be a government town and the houses had to go for sale, my folks had always dreamed of having a farm, and so we moved here. So I was in the 9th grade when we came here. A bunch of my brothers and sisters all went to school here, and grandkids went to school here, but I didn't. I started in town.
My dad worked for Simplot, and we moved from Grandview, and we lived, there's a little house right next to the railroad tracks on Pioneer Road, right across from where Delbert McCall lived, kind of a little lane down there, and we lived there, and I went here to school 2nd through 4th, so I also had Mrs. Carriger. And my favorite story, especially since I met Larry 22 years ago, was why am I getting weepy? We would walk from our house with a wagon to the Whitstran store. And we would have, Mom and Dad would let us have whatever pop bottles were available. We didn't drink a lot of pop, and we would pick up pop bottles along the way, and then we would sell them at the Whitstran store for penny candy. Yeah. And it's a favorite memory because back then, if you had a dime, you could only get 9 pieces of candy because there was a penny tax. And so Ralph would let us pay 5 cents at a time so we could get 10 pieces of candy. So then when I met this guy, I didn't know him, but I remembered his mom and dad, and it's always been a favorite memory. And he turned out to be a wonderful father.
I remember the school and the community. A lot of our kids that went here and were part of the community, a lot of them ended up being leaders. And when they went to town, they were on the student government. Anyway, we just ended up with a lot of leaders in our town, and we ought to be proud of that. They got it from this community and from the schools and the church, and a lot of them just excelled.
I was going to ask Paul, did you go to school here?
I did.
Paul Williams.
I was bused in. They had a program where they took kids out of the Prosser school system and brought them out here for 1 year and brought some of the kids in.
A cultural exchange.
Yeah, so I lived on Hinzerling Road, and the bus went down Hinzerling and then came over here and picked up kids, and then went back over to Gap Road and down and into the school, and they wouldn't let me get off the bus here. I had to go all the way into the school in Prosser and get on the bus that came back out here. So it was a very, very long ride on the bus during my 4th grade school year. What? Oh yeah, no, too busy yakking. But my father worked at the grain elevator here in the, I think it probably would have been the late 50s that he worked here. So, Bill Williams, and yeah, so he worked at the elevator. So.
And then you moved from where you were living here, you moved to Grandview then, right?
No, we lived in Grandview and we moved, and he was probably working at the elevator when we lived in Grandview, and then we moved out on the farm, out on Hinsberlin Road, just below Snipes. So.
Betsy Porter, of course.
She taught here when you and I were here, and Larry kept in touch with Dawn Porter.
Oh, yeah.
And we went up to visit him not too long before he passed, and we talked about her. And he told us that she quit teaching when they quit letting her tape kids' mouths. And that she couldn't tie them to their chairs anymore.
When I was in her class, and that was in 1957, you can look at my class picture, and I think there's at least 40 kids in the class. Wow. And she was able to keep order. And the first grade is when we all learned how to read. We learned our alphabet.
So she taught 40 kids how to read.
It was a huge class, a huge class.
I had some parent help maybe at home or something.
Yeah. And then one other thing I remember about going to school here was that they served lunch on a table in the hallway. And then we would take our lunches and go back to our room, and we would eat in the room with our teacher, whether we had hot lunch or a sack lunch. And then the teachers also were responsible. They took turns out on the playground keeping order out there. You know, it's so different than now.